Budget phone versus old flagship 2018. That video's coming up right now. Let's go. So what is up, guys? Nick here, helping you to master your technology. Got a question in the other day. Said, Nick, bro, listen up. Should I get a budget phone in 2018 or should I get an old flagship? Because there's just so many of these options now that I don't know what to do. These phones, they look premium, but then again, I could just pay about the same money and get a sexy old Galaxy S7, or I can get an old iPhone 6s Plus that has, Apple software and all that good stuff. So what is the deal? What is the better deal here? Well, first, let's define what is a budget phone. And it could vary depending on, how much money you make and all kinds of that stuff and your perspective on money and things like that. But personally, to me, what a budget phone is, for the most part, is a phone that comes in at under $300 or so. And an old flagship, definitely comes in at around, $300 if you get an Android. An iPhone, you're looking sometimes a little bit over that, but you can find an older iPhone under $300 sometimes as well, specifically if you go with a lower storage model. So we cleared up the price differences here. There's not too much of a difference here, and this is what makes it all the more confusing. Now, the iPhone SE is an older flagship phone in an older design, but definitely I'm gonna call this a budget phone right now just due to its price. It's in the budget arena when it comes to the price point right now, but I wouldn't probably buy this right now because the iPhone SE 2 is coming and that's probably going to be at a pretty decently low price as well. Okay guys, so let's clear up one of the first confusions, and this is the random access memory or the RAM on the device. So an older, phone like a Galaxy S7 is going to have 4 gigs of RAM, but if you go a little bit back further, like an S6, you're going to get 3 to 2 gigs of RAM. Things like that on older flagship. Now, these new ones with their 3 gigs of RAM, they seem tempting. Now, this Honor 7X right here does have 3. The international model has 4. And these phones are pretty, they're definitely something that definitely draws the eye because they have a premium looking build, and they just look like they might be worth it. But at the same time, you got to remember that the processor in these phones are designed to be a budget level processor. So what that means is that the performance is not very fast when it comes to RAM management and just everyday operation. So this phone right here, although it is much newer than the Galaxy S7, it doesn't feel quite as new and fast as the S7 does. So the S7, even though it's older, feels like a faster device. So you got to look at the processor more. The processor is not designed on a budget phone usually to be at a flagship level. So in terms of processing speed, you're definitely going to get a faster processing speed when it comes to an older flagship, specifically if it's not older than like 2 years. So I'm going to say for now, it's 2018. You don't want to go back further than say 2016 or 17. But when it comes to Samsung Galaxy devices, a lot of times their prices do come down quite a bit within just 1 to 2 years. So you can definitely get a really good Samsung Galaxy used for probably better performance than something like an Honor 7X, for example. Now, one area where these budget phones definitely have caught some of these flagship phones is the design. So the Honor 7X feels every bit as premium as say an iPhone 6s Plus, as say an iPhone 7 Plus. It feels just as premium as those. However, what you don't get is the same level of display. So while you do have a 1080p here, it's washed out in comparison to the really good Retina display here on an iPhone. So basically, you're giving and taking a lot of things, but when it comes to design, you don't really have to worry too much about this. Whether you get a budget phone or an old flagship, you're getting a nice design, especially if you look for a budget phone with good design. And that's what I would steer towards if you're even going to consider these devices. So when it comes to that, definitely they've caught up there. However, they don't have the same level of heft sometimes. So even though they're aluminum, it's a cheaper aluminum usually on these budget phones, so they don't feel quite as heavy. So even older flagship have a slight more premium feel, but they've definitely caught up, especially something like a Nokia 6. This is the last year's model. I probably will be getting the 2018 model soon, but this one had a nice level of heft, and this is one exception. But most budget phones are pretty close when it comes to that, build quality and design level on the smartphones here in 2018. So I wouldn't make my decision just solely on that. Next up, I want to talk about displays. Now, it depends on which smartphone you're going with. Like the Nokia 6, for example, I think has a fantastic 1080p display, definitely comparable to an iPhone display. However, I do think that the iPhone displays, for example, were tweaked better. And if you go with an older Samsung display, you're definitely ahead of the game of most budget phones. Most budget phones aren't going to give you a crispy OLED display. Now, some will give you an OLED display, but most of the time, it's not going to be a 1080p resolution, which is essentially full HD. It's basically the standard right now of, sharpness on a phone. I wouldn't go under 1080p here in 2018. And OLED here on the S7 definitely still looks very good. So if you're going with a used flagship and you want a great display, I would definitely recommend something from Samsung, because the older iPhones definitely hit, some budget phones like the Nokia 6 have caught up here in the display department. But overall, it's still not quite as accurate as an iPhone or not as punchy as an older Samsung. So in display, you're going to lose out on getting a budget phone even over an older flagship. So what about their battery life? What do you get here? Now, here's an area where buying a budget phone definitely excels, and that is in the battery department. Usually they have a similar size battery to a lot of the flagship phones, but because their processors are not as power hungry, they definitely last longer on a single charge than most flagships. And I can attest to that based on my experience using these devices. They definitely don't eat through battery quite as quick. However, you pay that price with a level of performance that's not up to par with a flagship phone. So my 6S Plus will die much faster than a Nokia 6, for example, but I also get better performance here. So you got to pick and choose. You want a faster performance or do you want better battery life? Now, the batteries also, when you buy a new budget phone, are new. Now, if you're going to go with an older flagship, typically you're going to buy this phone used, and then you're going to get a phone that has maybe an older battery. You don't know what's up with it. You might have to get it replaced. So be careful when you buy an older flagship and ask about the battery life from the seller. And let's hope they're being honest with you, because you never know what level of condition that battery is in when you buy an older flagship. Now, if you want to buy a trusted older flagship, definitely look at a refurbished certified model. Then you're likely not going to get a bad battery. But for example, I bought this iPhone 6S Plus, didn't use it too much, and the battery is already draining. And this was a used phone, so I'm just going to show you that right there. So next up, let's talk about software updates. Now, if you go with an iPhone, you're getting software updates. I don't care if it's a 2-year-old iPhone, a 3-year-old iPhone, even a 6-year-old iPhone 5S is going to be getting the new iOS 12 likely. You can see iOS 11.3.1. It's a small update for fixing the visual display issues that they were having with non-genuine parts. But at the same time, Nokia 6 has Android 8.1. So budget phones, depending on what you go with, like if you go with a Moto phone or you go to a Nokia phone, you're probably going to get several updates on these phones. So not bad, but more of the stock versions. Now with the Honor 7X, this also has got quite a few updates since I purchased this device, but not quite as many as a stock device. So if you're going with a budget phone and you're looking for updates, probably go for something like the iPhone SE, SE2 that's coming up, or go with, an older Apple phone. And if you're going to go budget phone, definitely get like one of these stock-based Android phones that are on the budget arena, like the Nokia 6 2018, or even something like the Moto series. Those are going to get way more updates than pretty much any of the other budget phones. So I wouldn't call it quite a draw, because I think that even though you're having a budget phone with some updates, I still think Apple's going to support their phones longer. But if you're going with a Samsung used flagship, you're going to definitely miss out on quite a few updates. So you're definitely choosing hardware over everything. If you go with an older Samsung flagship like the S7, you're basically choosing that nice build quality, that wireless charging, having all the features, but you're going to lose out on some software updates. Now, the phones typically do run pretty well, so that doesn't matter too much to me, unless you really just want to see an update all the time. But sometimes updates aren't for the good. Sometimes they actually slow your phone down. Okay, we have an area here where the older flagships just dominate these new budget phones, and that is the camera. So, if you're going with a flagship in 2018 from like 2 years ago, like the S7, dual pixel AF, 12 megapixel 4K camera, and Samsung was putting their best tech ever that they had when they came out with this phone, and it just crushes something like the Honor 7X. Don't get me wrong, the Honor 7X will take fine photos, no problem. Phones like this will be fine. The SE will do pretty good as well, but the SE is lacking that good front-facing camera, but that rear camera is pretty good starter camera. Getting an older flagship definitely beats one of these newer budget phones here in 2018. So camera, it's over with. Don't even think about it. If you're looking for a great camera, you want to steer clear of any budget device, because none of them are offering you an amazing camera. Okay, so let's talk the resale value here between, a new budget phone and a flagship phone from years ago. So basically, because of marketing, because people know what these more top level names are, they're going to be able to sell for more even though they're older than the budget phone. These budget phones lose value very quickly unless you sell it in the same year that it came out. Other than that, these are going to drop in value extremely quick. Now you can go find an S7 and you're still going to get at least, if you got an S7 and you're trying to sell it right now, you're still going to get like at least $250 for that phone. Good luck trying to get $250 back on an Honor 7X. Good luck trying to get $250 back on a Nokia 6, and good luck trying to get more than $125 or so for a used SE. It's not happening. So the resale value, even on an older flagship, even though it's older, is still higher than a new budget phone. So you might be saying, Nick, where is the OnePlus in this arena right here? Well, the OnePlus to me doesn't qualify as a budget phone or an old flagship here, unless you get like an old OnePlus, 5, or you get an older OnePlus 3T. The OnePlus 5 to me, and the iPhone 7 Plus, these are the sweet spot phones if you're looking for a banging deal and you don't want to pay flagship prices. You can get a 5T for around $500. Look on eBay, you can get around $400, $450. Now, a iPhone 7 Plus, same thing. These phones are only 1 year old and they do have pretty much the same level of performance, camera, and things like that as most of the flagships, and they're a little bit better than an older flagship. So to me, these are the sweet spot 1 year, 1.5 year old phones. The 2 year old phones are the sweet spot for a great, a cheap, low price and still being better than new budget phones. But if you're looking for the best balance of performance and price, look at the mid-range, look at stuff around $400 to $500, like 7 Plus and 5T. And I want to recommend you stay away from certain phones like these. The Galaxy S5, the S6, and the iPhone 6, the 6 Plus. Stay away from these phones. They're from 2014. They're extremely slow. They don't run amazing. And I know a lot of people are triggered when I talk crap about, the iPhone 6 not being great, but I'm calling like it is. And a lot of people say, well, you cracked your phone. This guy's making no sense. Has nothing to do with that. This is running an A8 processor, 1 gigabyte of RAM. It's slow. The Galaxy S5, same thing. It's slow. While it does have a pretty decent processor, Snapdragon 800 series, has a pretty solid camera, not bad camera on the rear, it's still slow. So just stay away from those phones that are super, super old. And if you're even going to go flagship, don't go any further than 2 years. And that's budget phone versus flagship phone 2018. Personally, like I say, if I was looking for the best balanced deal, I would definitely go with probably a slightly older iPhone, like 2 years, or I would go with something like a 5T or a 7 Plus from 1 year ago. Those are my best recommendations. If you guys found this video helpful, enjoyable, entertaining, informing, do me a favor, click that like button for me. Any questions, comments, concerns, drop them down below. I try to get back to all the comments I can. Make sure you have notifications turned on, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Nick here, helping you to master your technology. Thank you very much for watching, and peace.